Remember when Gary Lineker signed for Barcelona in 1986? He joined Terry Venables and Mark Hughes in Spain, and all of a sudden, Barcelona images appeared with far more regularity on the pages of my weekly football gospels, Shoot, Match and Roy the Rovers. Football strips had always intrigued me, but I was used to seeing the kit manufacturers favoured by British teams, brands like Umbro, Adidas, Admiral, Bukta, Hummel and Le Coq Sportif. So when European clubs appeared in my weekly football mags, the apparently obscure kit manufacturer logos really captured my interest. Kappa featured on Juventus shirts, Ineri adorned a host of Italian jerseys including Napoli, Sampdoria and AC Milan, and of course Meyba was stitched onto that iconic Barcelona kit. I didn't know what the M logo stood for on the Barca kits. It was a different world back then when it came to the exposure of overseas teams. Meyba seemed to disappear after Barca changed kit suppliers to Kappa in 1992, by which time the Meyba brand had been worn by the likes of Maradona, Ronald Koeman, Hristo Stoichkov, Michael Laudrup and Pep Guardiola. The kits may have been a thing of the past, but the memory of that red square and blue M continued to hold a mysterious allure for football shirt connoisseurs. A State of Mind loves football culture. Our logo is based on the vintage Dukla Prague crest. So we were delighted when a Meyba advert unexpectedly appeared on the pages of the quite brilliant Pan Arrow magazine. We just had to find out more, so took a trip down to Meyba's London headquarters to speak to creative director Neal about the rebirth of an iconic football brand.
Like any of us, I started with like my first shirt, and I remember them just being important to me. And embarrassingly, I'll say one of my first shirts, if not my first shirt, was the Scotland jersey of 77-78. Because I say that embarrassingly, not that I don't love the Scots or the Scotland jersey, I adore it, but being a proud Welshman, I'd like to have said it was the same season, the Admiral Wales, where you knocked us out of the qualifying for the World Cup, actually, with the hand of God Jordan at Anfield, which we've never forgiven you for. But anyway, I had that jersey because I was not a closet, but I was a child Liverpool supporter, as well as Newport County, my local team. But you know, that sort of age, I would have been about 8. Then you focus more on like the big team. And because I love Liverpool, I love Dalglish, and from Dalglish I just love that jersey. Anyway, I remember getting it for Christmas, and I can literally tell you now, I can see that box. They used to come in like a box set, and there'd be a little piece of plastic where you could look in and see it. And I could look in and see the jersey beneath. And I remember sort of getting it out. I remember the red socks with the Umbro thingy going around the top of the socks. And when I say I can remember it, I can really remember it. Do you know what I mean? It left a mark on me, strangely, I'd say out loud. But, you know, it was very important. And then from then on, all jerseys kind of were. But I never intended to collect them. I didn't even see myself as a collector until semi-recently, even though I had lots and lots of shirts. There was never like for me about filling in the gaps of shirts you're supposed to have in your top 10 just because you should, for instance. You know, that wasn't part of my game. I got shirts I loved because I loved them for whatever reason, but it was personal more to me. So in that way, I didn't see myself as a collector, if you know what I mean. Even though I've ended up with quite a large collection, I've got lots of shirts that people would want to have. I still sort of just see it as a passion. I mean, I was lucky to be in, I suppose, the right place, the right time, that I'd written the book on football shirts, which was great. So I became known as that because, quite frankly, I was the first to do it. And I did the first exhibition. There's been lots of copycats exhibitions since, but I did an exhibition called The Art of the Football Shirt. And I'm not trying to do a sale for me. I'm just explaining the sort of trail of it. But we did it with a fashion trade show called Jacket Required. And it was intentional. You know, I did it there, not about saying this player wore this or this player this. This was more like, look, Lois used to sponsor Omnia Nicosia. Fiorucci, you loved to see on Inter Milan. It wasn't the Fiorucci jeans that we all love. It was actually a salami. You know, Socrates, the player, wore this Corinthians jersey to sort of get people's rights and votes and democracy in. You know, it was linking football shirts to all the stuff that we love, the cultural stuff, not just football. Anyway, so from that, it kind of resonated, I think. And then I'd been known as a football lover anyway. I'd written the book on trainers in 2003. Again, I think especially like the dressers, the casuals had always like kept the place in their hearts for me. Sounds funny to say that loud, but I'd been respected for that because, again, that was the first book on trainers at the time. When I made the book on trainers, the publishing house were like, who wants to get a book on trainers? It literally was the first one, and it just happened that I could do it. And so I suppose I had the kudos that people knew that I was into the stuff they loved before it became trendy. Not that we all didn't love it, but before it became mainstream trendy. And so when Meyba were coming back to market, my name was put into the ring, and I was really over the, I was going to say over the moon like a football thing, but I was really pleased to get it because, as we've discussed, those sort of foreign exotic brands were really important to my heart. So for me, it was like, wow. It gave me more excitement than saying if Nike had rung me. No offense to Nike, I think they make some great jerseys, but it was like, wow, Meyba, man, that's Meyba. I remember Meyba, the M. I was really excited to do it. It was almost like a geek's little dream sort of thing. So, but the one thing I'd say is, because I'm in charge of the creative direction of how Meyba come back to market, even though I'm seeped to the pores in like retro and history and respecting the past, I think you massively should. And Meyba for me really ticked that box, not just because of a great brand and my memories, but if you go through the team who wore it, you had Cruyff as manager, Maradona wore it for a year, Koeman, Pep, Stoichkov, Laudrup. The litany of seeing those people wearing the M logo was like a big pull for me, because it's not like we're coming back to market or coming to market saying like we're this new football brand. We are a heritage football brand. But the massive thing for me was that I didn't want to just be somebody who ended up making retro jerseys. I love retro jerseys, but I didn't want it just to be about that. I think you should create a today which then becomes looked back on nostalgically in the future. And if you're going to just always be looking back to your past and remaking your old jerseys, then how's that going to happen? It's going to be like history repeating itself. So, and I was also very aware of that link between football and fashion, not just on the terraces and that sort of dresser sense as I've touched on, but also how your modern kids were coming into football and loving football shirts. Now you'd see rappers wearing football shirts, all these people you'd never even dream of, and all these like American pop stars and grime artists and all these people suddenly wanting to be seen in football shirts, which had never happened. And so I knew there was a need to sort of sate that desire and to take jersey design seriously. Sick of these templates or lazy, just like all blue or whatever top or something, There was a screaming demand to sort of like put some thought back into some jerseys, If you look back just to the 80s, and look at the Tottenham shirt we were looking at earlier, which has got the sort of chevrons across it, and you see Gaza wearing it, or Celtic having the number 10 or the numbers on the front of their shorts, or, Newcastle when they had that sort of purple and bluey reddy hoop top. Remember the granddad collar. We all dug these things, we all loved these things, and football shirts of today should be giving us back that in some form. And Meyba had that, on the Meyba shorts. I don't know if you've ever seen, but there's like a false pocket on the front of them. So it's just a pocket top with a button, and if you open it up, there's not even a pocket inside it. But it was just like that attention to detail, that sort of, again, that exoticness was all part of the pull for me. And so, yeah, they just ticked it. They just really did tick the list. And luckily, the people who were behind the brand and the Cruyff family still own a bit of Meyba, because when Johan was manager, he sort of became basically a Catalan, really, adopted Catalan. He loved sort of Catalonia so much. And his son ended up playing their Yordi. And so when Meyba were involved with Barca, they ended up owning a part of the brand, and they still do. But the people who are mainly behind it have got a history in football as well, very sort of, should we say, backed up knowledge, way of working in football. So I'm backed, luckily, behind the scenes with this amazing team, but then who've bought into how I want to take it and how my direction. So hopefully, like I said, it's got a glorious past. I just want to give it a glorious future. You know what? I think I was lucky enough to be just a voice for a lot of us. That's honestly the way I see it, and the book kind of reaffirmed that to me. I was just like many of us, not just in Britain but around the world, who their first jersey and then every jersey after, or just like seeing it on blurry television screens or seeing it in the local, stadium or whatever, left a big mark. And some people you talk to may not be very knowledgeable about much. You see, they weren't like people who knew too much about anything really, but if you ask them about football, or if you ask them about football shirts, they're almost like statos. You know what I mean? Literally be like, well, I remember the one, it had green and thingy down, just any sort of thing. Remember when it had the little sponsor, though they only wore it for a season. That kind of conversation that you could have with people that you'd only just met, and you both share this passion. You both share this love. So for me, it's not about the link to the player. It's just, even though I just said I love Dalglish, as in to think about that they wore it, and it doesn't matter to me about the the better embellishments, like you said. The match worn kits are a bit better spec, especially nowadays, whatever. It doesn't bother me. And I know Simon Shakeshafter, we mentioned Shaky, a friend of mine who's a big collector like that, he just is only interested in match worn and sort of like looks down his nose at me being a replica kit collector. But for me, no, it makes no difference whatsoever. The fact that it was all so rare back then is what made it great. I never went abroad until I was about 70. My family just holidayed in Wales. We were just one of those families, not rich enough or whatever, to bother going abroad. So I didn't ever have the abroad stuff when I was younger. So I think what made it so special, those foreign brands and foreign teams and foreign kits, was the rarity of it. I don't know if you remember, but the first sort of time I saw certainly South American clubs was the Club World Cup, when Liverpool played Penarol one season from Uruguay, and they had a yellow and black strip. I remember that. They also played, I can't remember who else they played in the Club World Cup. It was the first time you saw that, another sort of South American team. And so literally, you didn't even know the names of their teams. If you knew the strip, you knew your stuff. And then to add in the exoticness of a foreign label, like if you're sort of dressing inclined, if you're into clothes and you clot clothes and you clot labels, then the label on top of that jersey was another thing, just an extra thing to be like, what is that? And for me, Meyba was probably part of that. Initially when I first saw Meyba, when Mark Hughes and Lineker were over there, and Archibald and Altel, I just remember them as the M logo. It was only a few years after that I actually learned, it was Meyba, and then learnt a bit more about it. But the M logo struck me, and again, for all of us, just from that list of names, you kind of turned your attention, and it was, how often did we see those games? We didn't see those games hardly at all. You couldn't then go and do a rerun unless you pressed video, and I don't even know if videos were around at the time, thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? So it was that exclusive, exotic rareness which made it all so special, and including in that, with Barcelona in that story, the way they combined those two blues and red. You could say wear a blue and red. Not many British teams would wear blue and red stripes anyway, but if they did, they'd be quite a normal blue and quite a normal red. The exoticness of how they just got the purpley red just right, and the sort of off-scale blue, and then put them together. And for me, honestly, it was everything ticked the list. And Meyba and other brands like that, an Aerie, NR, even Penalty over in South America with Brazil, all of that stuff just took my fancy, and that's what I went hunting for. So when I first started to collect, and even to this day, my collection has, I don't know, if it was a quarter of it was British clubs, I'd say it was more. Not even that. I've always been interested in foreign clubs, the foreign strips, something different. And so that's how I am anyway. Without being a big head, I think doing the book, because the book first came out as a lover's guide in 2016 before I sold it to Penguin, and then came out as a football shirts book, and of course there was collectors before it, but it wasn't as big as it became since then. And to give you an example of that, there's a book I was in 2003. So I made the trainer's book in 2003, or I should say I authored the trainer's book in 2003. But the same year, somebody approached me about collecting, and they were sort of saying how weird collectors are. And I said, well, not all collectors are weird. Lots of people collect cool things. I said people collect vinyl, people collect trainers, I collect football shirts. But at the time, that's what I'm trying to say, really. They kind of put me in there as this weirdo collecting football shirts because it wasn't seen as a done thing. I was like one of those nerdy guys in their eyes. That's how they sort of span collecting football shirts was. So it was kind of more, it was way not as mainstream as it's become. And so it was a lot more of that kind of like nerdy train spottery angle to it, even though I certainly didn't count myself in that. But then, without a doubt, up until like round about 2016 type thing, really, the only money where you had to pay for proper jerseys was in match worn. That's where you'd have to pay. Even 500 quid would have been seen as quite a lot unless it was somebody really famous. To go to the fast forward to today, like, as we were mentioning, the Holland shirt of 88, I mean, to get just a standard replica of that, the last one I saw, which I think is online now, is 900 quid. Just for the replica, just came out at the time. And that's even when you look at that, there's all these snide copies, and some of them are good and clever, or even like official reissues. People will still pay the proper money for the real thing, and that's certainly developed over the last 5 sort of years. And I think it's not just sort of people of my age or that sort of age group. It goes right the way down, and that's why 90s shirts are so sort of collectible now. You using the Holland 88 as an example is because it's more people who were young and saw that when they were young, whereas I was an older man at 88. I don't know. Well, actually, I was about 19 or something like that. I look back to the time before that to get my old vintage shirts. When people started collecting that sort of era of shirts, I was like, they're not old and collectible. But obviously I was an older person. But anyway, it's just a huge thing. And rather than sort of going away, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. And if I've learned anything kind of like with this sort of story with collecting trainers and people being interested in trainers, is that I'd say football shirts is going to go the same path, just get bigger and bigger and bigger. We think it can't get bigger, but just look at what's happening now. Look at PSG making jersey with Jordan. Look at Real Madrid working with some fashion house they just announced now. Emporio Armani are making Napoli shirts. Everything with football shirts is going, so different to how it was even 5 years ago. There is a gap with some clubs, and I'd say Britain's way behind the curve of, like, Italy's way more onto how the link between fashion and football is getting bigger. Not on the terraces, because as you know, the fashion on the terraces in Britain was probably the best since the 60s up to today. Don't get me wrong, we all know there's been some great movements elsewhere, in Italy especially. But, we're the ones where I think fashion and football are intrinsically linked like nowhere else in the world, number one. But to go back to sort of like clubs, I mean, basically I think football has been like almost in the dark ages. Would let's sort of say like your standard chairman and your standard shop and your standard kit supply, if they could give you the same mug and slap something on it, and if they could give you like a mouse mat and and then just give you a T-shirt or "We've got to Wembley" and just write it, there's no thought, there's nothing. They don't traditionally anyway, shall we say, the right people haven't been involved in thinking about the merch that you want to buy in club shop, and all of us, love football, have kind of been a bit starved, I think, and that's what's happened. We're like, we'd go into the shops and be dying to buy something and wear it with our club on it, but can't because it all looks so naff, and it's been like that gap to supply it. And I think maybe what happened is with the modern world, like with social media, we can all reach each other a lot quicker. And then sort of make something and say, look, I've got this, I want to sell it. Do you want to sell it to like-minded people? But also, the world's smaller in manufacturing sense, so you can get stuff made. So I think the kind of public have produced everything they'd like to see from their clubs, which the clubs aren't doing because they've had to. And slowly, and some of them quicker than others, the clubs have caught on and realised what's going on out there. But even then, though, like I said, literally, I think I'd hold up PSG, not because I admire them or whatever, but if you think about, they've opened a dedicated flagship store in LA, they've opened a dedicated flagship store in New York, and if you go in them, they're like catwalks. They take fashion and football and what they're putting their badge on ultra seriously. I'm against the link up with Jordan because I just think there's this continual basketballization of football going on, which they kind of would continue to do, and I don't want it to go down that road because I think football's football and it's something we should always be proud of and protect. But that's happening. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you like me and you've looked at kits this season. So many of us talk about the Venezia kit, which was done by a group of boys called Nowhere FC from New York. Really switched on, cool guys, and they've become involved with some of the switched on Italian clubs, because some of the Italian clubs are a bit ahead of the curve, and they know that should now be taken seriously. So they're getting good people to come in house to design for them and be involved. So, yeah, to go back to what you said, I think it's strange how the clubs. I haven't been up to Celtic, I must admit, or not to lots of those clubs, but certain clubs, when you go there, you can see that they just aren't. They're not realising what's happening yet, but they will. This will all come. I think by the end of the decade, it'll be totally standard for every club to do like their club club shirt release will be probably on models. If you think for all our era, right up until very recently, you would have the team stood or sat with the manager. Everybody's like that. If they'd done anything, they would have gotten some sort of page 3 girl to sort of sit there with a ball. If you think now and compare that to the fashion shoots and launches you see for football strips now, the world's totally changed, and some clubs are sort of realising it quicker than the others, but I think it become the standard. I think the link between football and music is, for us, the fans, massive. And again, I'd go back to Britain. That sort of link is even more, the deeper and where it started, and I think, again, sort of without repeating myself, I think it's something else which the clubs have maybe noticed as a sort of an aside. They never sort of seem to take into account what the club is. The club is nothing without its fans. If we all walked out and stopped singing and stopped caring, they could go and play wherever they wanted. It'd just be like some guys kicking a ball around. And the fans make football for me. Don't get me wrong. I love football as a spectacle. I think it's an art when it's played properly. I go back to the primeval side of it as well, where we wear green, you wear blue, we don't like you, you're from down there. I get it all. I dig it all. I like the other side where it brings us together and you think this is a shared passion and this is great. I can talk to you. You care about clothes. You're obviously into what I'm into. We can connect. Going back to the thing about music, though, yeah, I think, I'd say sort of like since the 60s, and I don't even mean in the literal way, but I'm sure you've done it. But if you Google like the Liverpool fans singing on the Cop, and just see the whole thing swaying, and you can kind of take it for granted now with like You Never Walk Alone. It's kind of become so cheesy, but to see them singing like She Loves You, I think is one of the songs, for instance. That was the pop song. It was a pop song of a band which is from that city, proud to be from that city, and why are all those like 12,000 people, grown men and women, singing a song too loud? It's something which is like, it makes us all feel we belong to the place, but also to each other and to the ground and to the stadium and to the club. And I think not just like the replicating the singing on the terraces, which is an important tradition and which is one quite unique to Britain. Italy, again, I go back to Italy because I equate Italy with being a bit like Britain if there's anyone out there. We love music, and I think we love fashion, we love music, and they all went hand in hand together for us since the 60s, quite frankly. And almost like your mainstream coverage, be it on the radio or be it on the television, just treated it as totally as an aside until recently. It's only now that people are starting to pay attention to it. It's only lately, as you said, maybe like with your Gallaghers getting involved and things like that, that again they've realised, yeah, let's look at this side. There should be more. There should be shows like you guys are doing, should be on mainstream TV, and it's great that you guys are doing it because you're meeting the demand and you love it like we do, and so you're bringing it to the people, and it should be everywhere. And so I'm just filling this glaring hole that lots of these brands have just ignored. A, because of they didn't know it was happening, or B, they didn't know how to fulfill it, or C, just thought they didn't want to. For me, like I said, to get Meyba back into football shirts, I wanted first to establish the label as a cool label in its own right. So having a sort of fashion brand angle to that was very important, because for me the two should go hand in hand. The stuff we make for our fashion line, which is going really well, we sell in Hanon, for instance, we've sold in End, we're selling in high-end fashion doors, and we're getting bigger around the world, quite frankly, is great, because I don't want our stuff just to be fashion stuff. The stuff you see in our fashion range, not all of it, but lots of it, or 90% of it, should filter down into our club shops when we get the clubs. So you'll go into that club shop and be able to buy something cool you actually like. It's been in the fashion range and you've had to pay 50 quid for it. I mean, for me, the fact you then got your badge, team's badge on it, say Celtic is suddenly opposite Meyba, if we dreamily ever got Celtic, for me would just be like, Jesus Christ, I've died and gone to heaven. That's for me the glorious time when we get some big exotic club that I've always dreamt of getting, Sampdoria, Athletic Bilbao. You'll probably see me running around naked the streets of Newport, because I'd be so excited. But yeah, the two would go together, those tops, we want to see the players wearing those tops. Lots of the jackets are designed as like training jackets. We might make them a bit more technical, a bit more stony, give them a different fabric, maybe a different colour. But I want to see the clubs we then now start to sign, when the players get off the team coach, they're wearing that jacket. And they want to wear that jacket. And then that goes round to us. You put it into the club shop, and then we all go in the club shop and we want to buy it. But yeah, the two are massively interlinked, and that's probably the essence of Meyba coming back to market now, that we treat ourselves as a serious fashion brand, but we treat ourselves as a serious football shirt supplier. We're going to make a range of trainers now, and it's going to be a collaboration between Meyba and actually have my name on it, whichever way we do that. But I'm quite... I'm honoured to be able to do that, but also it means I can bring my take to it. I suppose, being somebody sort of known as being on the terraces, I think people would probably think it's going to be kind of like that sort of ilk, but I've tried to sort of please a few kind of genres of people, shall we say, with the models we're making. But yeah, I've just literally sent off the CADs today, so we're going to factory. We're going to make 4 styles, and I'm really excited. I just hope it's one of those things where you really sort of, when you care about it so much, it's even more important to you, because I just want people like yourselves and people like that to dig the shoes that we've actually decided to make. But yeah, they're looking good. They've got a track record of making them, the factories we're working with. So again, it'd be another one I can tick off my list if it comes true. I don't want to just be seen as a fashion brand who don't make football shirts. I want to see Meyba on the brands as quick as I can, on the clubs as quick as I can. So we were kind of like, we're not just going to go to any old club. We want to get clubs where everybody kind of thinks that club is cool, or the club itself buys into our ethos, because lots of them are sort of old-fashioned. Again, like we were saying about the club shots, the clubs are just old-fashioned themselves, so they don't want to have any of this sort of stuff in their club shop. They don't want a shirt which changes how they've had it for the last 20 years. We don't want anything to do with those clubs. So it's kind of like a target list of good clubs that we'd like to get, and then hoping that we can get them. In the short space of time we had, the first league which was kicking off, where we had the opportunity to get a club, was America, which for me was an opportunity, because A, the game in America is just growing exponentially, but B, they come at it in that kind of like new world way. So they're kind of like, as you probably remember from the NASL, when they changed it, when they used to have Pele and all the great players, and Bestie went out there. Even their kits then were superb. I've always loved the Rowdies jerseys and all that kind of stuff. The Chicago, New York Sting, Cosmos, Chicago Sting. I used to collect those jerseys loads. But anyway, that kind of modern approach has filtered over to modern day America, and they're kind of very linked and aware, maybe driving a bit actually, like lots of those new world countries, the link between fashion and football, and not maybe treating it as sacrosanct as we did, changing some of the rules, wearing a baseball cap, with another team on top of another team's shirt. So anyway, we kind of looked around and thought, well, who can we get? Who can we speak to? We'd love to get them. And Las Vegas was kind of near the top of my list, mainly not just because, thinking that Las Vegas is such an amazing team. They play in the kind of like feeder league to the MLS, the one below if they extend the franchises. So they're a good standard. But it was like, wow, man, imagine getting Las Vegas. That's a name to have on your roster type thing. And also then from when we spoke to them, we approached them, the chairman was like bought into it straight away. He was really keen on like getting a really cool kit. He loved the idea we could have the fashion range. He ordered stuff from the fashion range for the players to wear like straight off. And he was like, look, yeah, you guys go to town on the kit, and on the shoot, and we'll buy into it. And so, yeah, we were pleased to announce last week, I think it was, that the Las Vegas Lights was the first Meyba team of my tenure, as it were, which I'm really pleased. And I mean, honestly, it went down so well. It was like covered everywhere. The Lights have sold more jerseys than they've ever sold, and so yeah, it's a good. I'd phrase it as a statement of intent. It's like saying this is what we're about. this is what we want to do. Here we are back in the world, and watch the space. We'll get some more teams now.